Hi, everyone. I was working on a piece, you see behind me here, by Bach, written about 1720, that at first glance is just another piece of music to work on, to get the notes right, to get the feel right. But then as I started thinking about his life and what was happening at about 1720 during his life, it began to, I think, take on a deeper meaning, a meaning that was describing things as he saw it then, which was not entirely pleasant. In fact, it was very, very difficult for a year for him. I thought I'd share some of those thoughts and just a little bit about his life and about this piece of music, how he communicates that, just a few things, how he communicates that, and really what ends up being a sermon, but is not using written or spoken words. And I think, for me, it's just speculation, but still, having studied his life, you get an idea that he expressed himself through his music. He didn't really express himself through written letters or diaries or anything else. There's very, very little of that. And so what we have is basically his music to try to understand him and his life a little better. I think that by doing this, by describing his own life, I think as he experienced it then, he gives us some insight into our own lives and what it's like to live this life. Give you a couple of things that he had gone through already. As a 10-year-old boy, he lost both his parents. His mother died first. His father died a few months later. He was an orphan. He was taken in by his brother. That wasn't totally a very good situation. Ended up going to a school 200 miles away. He had to walk there. He stayed there for several years, and I think his talent was eventually discovered at that particular school. Then he comes back. He had a very tumultuous couple of jobs. Didn't really work out very well, and another court job, which lasted a good 10 years, but he was always caught in the middle between two dukes who didn't like each other, and he finally ends up south and just slightly west of Berlin in a town called Curtin, where he's working for a duke who really likes him, really likes music, and has lots of money. It was a wonderful job. He had time to do things that he wanted to do, and he also, of course, he was married by then. His first wife was Maria Barbara, who was his second cousin, and life was going well. But in 1720, things turned sour pretty quickly. He was on a trip away from home for a good length of time, and when he comes back to his own home, he finds out that his wife has died and that she had already been buried for a month, and he was not able to be there. So this is a very difficult time for him, and I think in some ways he's working through these difficulties by this piece of music and writing this piece of music. Perhaps this is some sort of response, some sort of expression of what he's going through. I kind of get the feeling that it is, even though it's not stated anywhere, it's not given in the title or anything like that. But I've got a few thoughts written down here that led me to believe this. Piece is based on harmony. With Bach, there's lots of harmony, and there's not really a discernible, singable melody, but there's lots of harmony. And there's a journey of harmonies. With Bach, there's a lot of journeys of harmonies, and he goes in very unusual directions. This piece is rather puzzling at first. There's a strong sense of what we think is traditional harmony, what we're used to hearing, but then that's stretched way out to its limits. There are a number of chords, and chords that are rather unusual, that have a very dissonant sound. Let me give you an example here of one. Goes something like this. And then right there, that would be that particular chord would be a very popular chord in jazz, particularly Miles Davis, who did study Bach, used chords like that very often. But it is dissonant. It does give us anxiety. It gives us apprehension about what's coming next. And they don't resolve. They don't go to a nice place of repose. They just keep building in anxiety. They go on to more dissonant chords, and they sustain the anxiety and the apprehension. So the progress is also, it's quite apart from what we usually expect in chords. And so these chords surprisingly lead somewhere else that we may not be terribly pleasant, maybe out of joint, or a little, at least out of expectation. Some other things. You get the idea that maybe life for Bach, and I think life for us as well, is something that is unpredictable. It goes in places where we don't necessarily want it to go, and it goes out of our control. We may do everything right, we may do everything well, but life takes a bad turn, and we need to weather it out, so to speak. Sometimes we're in a place where we get stuck, and a lot of us are in that kind of place. In Bach, he expresses this musically by simply one note, which is down here. It's low D. And he simply doesn't take us very far from that. It keeps repeating over and over and over again. And it's almost like you come to a point where you're resigned that that note's never going to end. And that note isn't really a very important note in the key of C minor, even though this piece is called Prelude in C minor. So at any rate, only the Lord, in our own lives, when we have a lot of dissonance, a lot of things going on, like is happening right now in the world, only the Lord can control that. I mean, as we know, viruses do not obey politicians. They do not obey military leaders. They do not obey police. They do their own thing. And so in this case, we look, to God. To God is the only authority and the power to really do something about it. But oftentimes, as we know, he tarries. He doesn't go on our schedule. He's got other things in mind, things that are far bigger than we can conceive. So in looking at this piece, it's Bach who is the creator. And he has control over where this piece is going, and he has the authority to change the harmony, but he chooses not to. He chooses to keep going in this very strong, rather dissonant and apprehensive way for quite some time. So if the harmony is changing all the time in this short little piece, which is less than 2 minutes long, is there anything that stays the same? And the answer is decidedly yes, and it's the rhythm. The rhythm stays the same. Each measure, in fact, has the same rhythm. Let me give you the first measure. The first few measures there, and it's exactly the same all the way through the piece. It's very steady. It's very predictable. It's always there. It's the bedrock. It's the framework on which this piece is constructed. So if we look at life like that, then it's God. It's the Lord who is our rock, and he is our Redeemer. And he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, our fortress, our shield. He's never going to leave us. He's never going to forsake us. And I think this is true for Bach. In 1720, he had not written his greatest stuff yet. But by 1730, he's written some of the most profound pieces of Christian music that have ever been written. Some people say the most profound. The St. Matthew Passion, the St. Mark Passion. I'm sorry, not the Mark, but the John Passion, the cantatas. All of these have been written by 1730. So I think what Bach experienced is true for us today. God is faithful even when we're not, even when we don't understand things and we don't see his hand, he's still there. He remains. He gives structure to what is sometimes chaotic, at least from our point of view, and he will resolve things. This we can trust him with. His resolutions, though, are most often not what we expect or even can imagine. I mean, if we look back in our lives, we see how these things have worked out. We see how difficult times have worked out. And it was beyond our imagination, beyond our way of thinking, beyond our comprehension, beyond our ability to manipulate or plan for. And it shows his hand at work, and that his ways of dealing with situations are creative and remarkable at the same time. And for Bach, he begins to show us hope in this confusing harmonic situation here towards the end of the piece. He goes very, very ingeniously from C minor to G major. Now, they're both related. They are related, but the piece has the title Prelude in C minor, but he doesn't end there. He ends somewhere else. And that's often the case it is with life. C minor is often thought of, here it is, as quite an ominous chord. It's thought by some commentators to have passion in it. Others think it has supernatural, which is kind of interesting to think about that. Supernatural connotations or evokes supernatural thought, but it's a somber key. It's a ominous key. It's not a happy key. G major, on the other hand, is very bright, very, very upbeat, very sunshiny. And Bach takes us from this dark, ominous C minor to this bright, sunshiny G major in a quite unexpected way. And so it is with God. He accompanies us on the journey. Just like the rhythm is always there, God is always there with us. It may involve some very unpleasant moments, but he works through all things. And all things with him work together for good. And we can know this. We can trust this. We can understand this. We can, in the things we cannot comprehend, we can trust, which is really what faith is. It's comprehending. It's not necessarily comprehending, but it is trusting that which we cannot see, as Hebrews 11 says. We can't see it. We don't understand the mechanism. We don't understand how it works, but we can trust God, who is the one who makes it work. So the unexpected resolution for both our Christian walk and for this piece of music is both wonderful and positive. That we can trust. When God walks with us through difficulties, he knows we can't turn back. You can't turn the clock back. You can't make things the same. They're not going to be the same. Just like this piece, once it starts, it's not going to come back to the original point. I think Bach had that in mind. It's going somewhere else, somewhere new, somewhere better, but it's going to be a difficult road getting there. And so God takes us forward. He takes us forward regardless. He ushers us into a new and often unexpected, and a very resolved, bright place. So let me try to play it for you.